but can I borrow your pen, please?
Sure.
So we have a couple things on our agenda for today. One being Alderwoman Navarro's board bill, and the other one being Alderwoman Ingracia's board bill. Alderwoman Ingracia, do you have a preference? How it's okay. So we'll go ahead and call the Parks and Environmental Matters Committee meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Martin.
Present.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Navarro.
Present.
Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Alderman Todd. Chairman Cohen.
Present.
Alderman Bosley. Alderman Todd. You have 5 present and 4 is present.
And Alderman Bosley and Alderman Todd are currently occupied at another committee, so please excuse them until they're able to be available. So we'll go ahead and take Alderwoman Ingracia's board bill first.
We need to do minutes.
Oh, yes, sorry. Thank you, Alderwoman. So we'll, does anyone have any questions pertaining to the November 13th meeting minutes? Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion on the meeting minutes from the November 13th meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes from the November 13th meeting.
Second.
Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd. Chairman Cohen.
Aye.
You have 5 aye votes.
Great. With that, we'll take up our agenda for today. Alderman Ingracia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here on Board Bill 135, which would allow for the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Department to provide written notice to anyone applying for a permit in a city park to prohibit firearms, concealed carry firearms at events. It would be on the it would be the responsibility of the permittee to provide signs that are aligned with state statute 571107, section 15. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee, Alderwoman Tyus.
So, you're and I haven't read 571.107.15 recently, so, does that include law enforcement?
It does not spell out that law enforcement would be included, no.
So, what I'm saying is, so, your ordinance, your board bill, is law enforcement, would they be able to still have,
Yes,
okay. And anybody else, they would have, so, when they apply for the permit to use the park, then, the park department would have to tell them, if just because you got a concealed carry, that you cannot have it in this area, right?
it would be the responsibility of the permittee to provide the signs, put up the signs temporarily in the area that they're using the park. And in the board bill, it discusses the fact that the Parks Department will provide that notification that they have the option to do that and what the requirements
I
are.
thought we were gonna post in the parks already.
That's for Alderwoman Spencer's bill. I think that there have to be signs designating the parks as a child care facility.
Okay, so in the ones that, so the ones that will be childcare facility, they should already have signs up posted, no concealed weapons.
That would, be
Right,
my
so this would be
understanding.
for some that would not be childcare facilities.
I think they're two separate bills that push back a bit on preemption, and so hoping that either one or both of them withstand a possible challenge.
I'm just trying to understand, how much signage, and, you know, if I don't understand it, then somebody else might not understand it also, so.
Yeah, and these would be just temporary during the
Right, I
the
understand.
exact activity, and it's in the state statute. It says sign displayed in a conspicuous place of minimum size of 11 inches by 14 inches with writing letters not less than 1 inch. So it's pretty specific.
So, pretty much, couldn't the Parks Department just have some made up that we could go out and put up?
I can definitely ask about that.
You know, like, that way,
Like
We-
the street.
Right, that way we wouldn't be dependent upon what somebody else does. It would all be, they would know, they would put them up, because during the times that you're having, an event, Parks Department just come out there and put them up. And that, even if it has to be part of the cost of the permitted activity.
Okay, yep, I'm happy to ask about that.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Alderwoman Martin, Alderwoman Navarro.
I remember, we discussed this bill previously and you addressed all of my questions, then, so I do not have any further questions. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Okay.
Thank you.
No other questions or comments?
No.
Alderwoman Rice.
Same as Alderman Navarro, I remember discussing this previously, and I think this is a good extra layer for us to have that hopefully we can withstand some more scrutiny on. So thank you for bringing this, and I would like to be added as a co-sponsor as well.
If there's no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill number 135.
I move we pass Board Bill 135 with a due pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection, Board Bill number 135 passes out with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. If I'm moving a little slow today, forgive me, I'm covered in poison ivy, so I'm very itchy.
That's what we do.
I never knew you not doing yard work.
I know, I need to start
And
figuring out how
like
to do
March.
yard work on it.
Chairman, do you mind if I just perch up here to hear?
You're welcome to.
To sit by Sharon.
All right.
Alright, so
I
the
can
next
stand
board
that. I
bill
sat by
that
Sterling
we'll be
45
taking up
years.
is Board Bill number 219. Alderwoman Heather Navarro is the sponsor. I understand we have some amendments for the board bill that we'll be entertaining as well, but let's first hear the board bill itself before addressing the amendments.
Adjust this chair.
Sorry, I'm pretty short.
You're tall, so you can have that one when you come up, okay? Thank you.
You did that on purpose, Christine.
She like jumped in it to get it to go down.
All right.
Great, thank you. So I'm here on Board Bill 219, which establishes building energy performance standards in the city of St. Louis. And it is the next step in the city's commitment to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2050, as well as our commitment to be powered by 100% clean energy by 2035. So I think it's an exciting step. It really puts St. Louis at the forefront of addressing climate change from the local level. And this bill has been in the works for at least a year. There's been a very robust stakeholder process that's included builders, developers, trades, the property owners, architects, the utilities. So I think it's a process we can definitely be very proud of, bringing all of these different stakeholders to the table. It also is the result of technical assistance that was provided by the American Cities Climate Challenge grant. So I think another thing that we can be proud of, that we received that funding, that technical assistance actually last year, and this has been the result of that hard work. The bill does, it's a follow-up to the benchmarking bill that was passed a couple years ago. So all buildings that are 50,000 square feet or larger have been reporting their energy and water usage to the city, and that has been very successful. We've had over 60% compliance rate without having to fine anybody. Oh, so now we're at 80.
83, is it?
83%.
For the 2018 year.
Okay, for the 2018 year, we're at 83% compliance in terms of those building owners tracking their energy and water usage. And that includes public buildings, school buildings, multifamilies, commercial buildings. So it's a pretty major undertaking, and I'd say it's been very successful. And so what this does now is to say, okay, we have all of this data. Let's go ahead and set up standards that are going to help us to reduce the energy usage in these buildings. And it does that by setting up this Building Energy Improvement Board that will promulgate the standards and assist in compliance, and also an Office of Building Performance, so that the building division has the capacity and the infrastructure to really see that this is carried out effectively. the compliance standards would be established by the board, by this Energy Improvement Board, and they would essentially go into effect next year in 2021, and then the building owners would have, there'd be a 4-year compliance cycle to achieve that. And then this Energy Improvement Board would have, would be composed of experts who could help anybody who's having issues complying or concerned that they won't be able to make that deadline. They will have access to expertise to help them define a pathway to get them into compliance. There is a fiscal note you'll see attached to the bill in terms of setting up that office and making sure the building division has the staffing to be able to carry this out. I do have an amendment. It's a couple of minor changes really to help clarify. Because like I said, there has been a lot of engagement, there's been a lot of opportunity for members in the community to comment, and so we wanted to make sure that everybody understood. So there are just a couple of changes, and I don't know if you want me to put that before the committee first, Chairman, or if you want me to answer questions on the bill itself first.
Let's go ahead and take any preliminary questions about the board bill. Alderwoman Tyus?
I have no questions right now. Well, I do have, the Alderwoman and I seem to have different, board bills. She doesn't have one with the fiscal note on it.
The summary has the fiscal note.
The one that's the
Mine's at
summary
the
in the
back.
top.
I
Yeah,
got
it should have the fiscal
I've got
note.
it, thank you.
Okay, I'm fine.
Thank you.
I do just want to thank our clerk who helped me make sure that I had everything in front of everyone that they might possibly need in reviewing this bill.
I have no question.
Oh, okay. Alderwoman Martin,
No questions.
Alderwoman Bryce.
I think, so my only question on the Building Energy Improvement Board, I think this is great. I think it's, I think it's really important for us to have this mechanism to be able to help people get to where they're going, not just expecting them to do it on their own. So I think that is, I commend you for that. I think that's really great work. One quick question, just what I was looking at, the board shall consist of 9 members, and it says at least 6 members of the board shall be residents of the city and 3 members shall be residents of the region. So you're saying you could have all of them be residents of the city, but you could, 3 of them could potentially be members of the the county or region at large. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Right, I mean, St. Louis region would mean that they could be members of the city or the county.
Otherwise, okay.
Correct,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And the reason we're doing that is, quite frankly, you want people to have certain expertise and specialties. We have a lot of boards in the building division. One of my boards, for example, is a sprinkler board. I don't have a sprinkler engineer who resides in the city of St. Louis. So this will give us a little latitude for actually doing that. And quite honestly, the hope would be that someday St. Louis County and other areas would draw into that. I'm sorry.
That rings when Frank's not telling the truth.
And for the record, this is Frank Oswald.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. I don't have any other questions. Thank you for bringing this.
No. Alderman Bosley. We're on board bill 219.
Okay, I'm sorry. Running back from committee to committee.
I know. It's okay.
Is this, okay, I've already read, no, I don't have any questions. That's fine.
Do we have any estimated impact on developers for passing this? Like, have you had any conversations with the, like?
We have had, developers involved in this process all along. And the reality is nowadays, new buildings are built to be energy efficient. It makes sense economically to build them that way. So, there's been no real negative feedback or anything like that. I don't think it'll have any effect whatsoever on development in a negative sense.
Is this only for new buildings?
No, it covers all buildings that are over 50,000 square feet.
Right. So
And
we have a lot of those
we do. We have, was it 9?
that have been around for over 100 years.
Yeah, we have about 1,000 buildings or so that are covered, so. But like I said, everybody's been made aware of this, everybody's been doing the benchmarking pretty much. you know, if I can just take a moment, I really equate this to very similar good public policy decision that was made, you know, 12, 14 years ago. And I know a couple of you were involved in this at the time, you know, when we really decided to make the lead issue a housing issue. And we took it over in the building division. And, you know, we went from basically 1 out of 4 children being lead poisoned to right now we're under 2%. You know, that's still too many, but this is really landmark legislation. I know it's not getting a lot of attention in the media. I know it's not that kind of thing, but this is really dealing with people's lives, dealing with people's health, you know, changing what our physical environment is gonna be and how our children are dealing with issues and breathing and all that kind of stuff. And it's really important. And we're doing it in a way that is really set us aside, you know, set us out in front. We're the first city in the Midwest to be doing it. We're doing it in a manner that really was terribly inclusive. You know, we have got all these different groups who've really been supportive and helpful through this process. And it's been about 1.5 years now that we've been meeting with these groups. So I really feel like we have a piece of legislation here that really helps change people's lives at the local level, you know, and does really good things for our community.
I'd also just like to add, we know that 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions, about 80%, are coming from buildings. And the way that this is set up is that the buildings are separated into building type. And so then this Energy Improvement Board is gonna look at the different building types, and then they will establish, you know, what is the minimum standard for that building type, you know, based on its usage. So it's not just kind of a flat, everybody's gotta reduce their energy by 50% in 4 years. It's definitely a tailored approach based on the usage of those buildings and, you know, what we believe is possible. And we're already seeing a lot of these buildings make reductions. Over the past year, a lot of these meetings were hosted in buildings that had already made big reductions. And we're seeing very large cost savings as well.
Seeing large cost savings, and we're also seeing, you know, an industry of jobs that is coming around this whole
Yes.
process here. You know, both from the people who just evaluate the buildings to all the mechanical contractors and folks who do all the work as well. So it's really a win-win for everybody involved.
So I'm fully supportive of measures like this, so don't get me wrong by my line of questioning here. I just wanna make sure that other stakeholders in the community have been engaged in this process and not just advocacy groups that are pushing, you know, what could be perceived as an agenda. I mean, granted, it's a wonderful agenda, but, you know, I wanna make sure that folks are aware that these changes are occurring around them, right?
Do we have a list of stakeholders?
Also, not to mention,
Can we list them?
Raji, can you talk just a moment about the stakeholders?
let-
I
Let's let
I
the chairman
don't know if
finish
my
his
voice is
I'm
weak
question.
or not, but, so not to mention, we have our own house that we're sitting in currently, City Hall, which is not the shining beacon of energy efficiency. So, I mean, how would this even impact, you know, our own, I mean, I see on here, you know, multifamily institutional municipal buildings over 50,000 square feet. Well, I mean, City Hall would obviously fall into that classification. To my knowledge, I haven't seen any drastic changes aside from LED lights and light switches that have stickers on them saying, please turn off the lights. You know, I mean, meanwhile, we have heating systems that are just like going gangbusters year round, including, and I've had radiators on in the summertime. You know, I mean, it's just, what are we doing in our own home here?
Well, I think this brings some accountability to that. As you guys probably know, I'm not the facilities commissioner, so I don't get to run that. But in fairness, the facilities division has been working with us. We did the city did entertain and actually take some loans from the state. What were the specifics on that? Was it about 3 million?
My name is Rajiv Rahulpati. I'm an analyst with the building division. I work for Frank.
Do we need to have him
Yeah.
come up here so
Yeah,
he can be on
for
camera?
the purposes of the camera and the microphone.
Here, Reggie, why don't you just pop in here real quick?
Here.
He literally popped in.
It's good to be up.
I know you had two questions for the loan that Frank is talking about. So,
Could he state his name?
oh, you mean to say
for
my
the
name?
microphone?
Sure. Rajiv Ravlapati, Government Services Analyst for the Building Division. The loan that Frank is talking about is a loan from the Division of Energy through the state of Missouri. It was about $1.3 million that Rick Ernst had applied for to do retro commissioning for 4 municipal buildings, all 4 of which have to comply with the benchmarking ordinance, which the Building Division personally benchmarks to make sure they're in compliance. If you're not familiar with retro commissioning, in layman's, it's basically a tune-up of a building's operational and existing systems that help make the building run. It's heating, it's lighting, it's cooling. The payback for the city will be 2.7 years, and we'll save about $500,000 annually on just the energy costs alone. And Shane, to your other question about have a broad group of stakeholders been able to provide input on this legislation? So I'll leave this for the committee, but we've got several stakeholders here. We've worked with the USGBC to help collect people who'd like to sign on to this board bill, but like Frank said, we've met since January of 2018 on a bi-monthly basis to work with stakeholders both from city agencies like the Building Division, Health Department, Mayor's Office of Sustainability, Otis with the SLDC, energy service companies like ERG, which is represented here in the room today, various trade groups, IFMA, BOMA, BJC, as we all know, the largest employer in the state. They've personally signed on as giving their support for BEPS. That's the acronym I'm using for Building Energy Performance Standard. So we've had a really inclusive process, and when we shared the first draft of the ordinance back in January, we gave a 2-week comment period. So in addition to all those stakeholder meetings, we gave another comment period for all our stakeholders to provide any additional comments.
I'm sorry, but I'm.
That's not who he was.
It's not. Those are advocacy groups and people who are involved in the enforcement of this. It's not the end users of these facilities that are ultimately impacted. So when I'm asking if we're reaching out to stakeholders, I mean, these are people. Has anyone even talked to St. Louis Public Schools?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
I mean, I haven't yet heard
I
that.
think like
in the-
BJC
you know,
it would be
so-
an end user,
I mean,
and
BJC is great, but BJC also has several billions of dollars that they have at their disposal to make these types of improvements. There are others throughout the city that aren't quite as wealthy and affluent as BJC that have these types of facilities that we need to be working with those people, obviously, to get them to a better place than where they are currently.
Sure.
But they also need to be aware that these types of legislative changes are happening and being codified so that they're not caught off guard. You know, I constantly get feedback from people who own, property throughout the city that they get caught off guard with changes that are happening around them and don't feel as though they've been engaged in the discussion. And obviously I can tell them, well, that's what we have committee hearings for, but they're not aware of them, so they can't come to the table to have those discussions. And I hear, you were meeting, bi-monthly for the past year now. I mean, that's a total of 6 or 7 meetings. That's wonderful. I mean, that's part of any, legislative process. But I want to make sure that before we're passing, things like that, and, perhaps, the sentiment is coming up because we've had a few other changes in the building code in the past, year or so that I've been getting feedback on. But it's just, it's not that I'm opposed to this. I'm very supportive of measures like this. I mean, we need to start rethinking the way that we're utilizing energy, how we're utilizing our buildings, what we're doing to improve, upon their environmental efficiencies, and certainly, avoid greenhouse gases and anything of the like. So, we have a world that is quickly deteriorating around us, and I mean, we want to be part of the solution, right? But part of that solution is engaging stakeholders and making sure that they're, at least being nudged in the right direction. I don't ever expect that we'll get full buy-in from folks like that, but it's at least nice to be able to engage them to help move the conversation forward instead of you know, just having people surprised or caught off guard by it,
If I can
so,
add something, Chair.
yeah, absolutely.
Is, I mean, the buildings will have to comply with this, like, short answer, yes, we have been engaging with building owners. Like we said, we've had those stakeholder meetings, but it's not simply been like, if you can't make it, too late, your input's not gonna be counted. We've done a pretty lengthy process where Frank and I and Emily, we're going out and actually meeting building owners themselves. So the end users who have to comply with this, yes, we have been talking with them, but, obviously, as an elected official, we can't reach out to everyone as possible, so like, we've made ourselves available, but we've reached out to the end users who.
But Mr. Chairman also recognized that this is the evolution of the benchmarking. And the benchmarking now is full 2 years into the process. So everybody, I can guarantee you, 83% of the people who do the benchmarking right now are aware of this.
Yeah.
And, we have had tremendous support for this. What we're talking about in numbers here, the Bank of America building is a great example right now. They were telling us how, the building manager down there, not the owner, but the building manager, she wants to replace one of their chillers. I think it's a $500,000 chiller or something like that. There's 3 chillers. It was built back in '82, that building. If they replace that one chiller, that chiller saves over $250,000 a year in energy consumption. So it pays it back in 2 years. Getting the owner to actually do that sometimes is difficult because a lot of these owners are in New York or in Los Angeles or something like that. This actually helps these building managers and these people who actually operate these buildings as well, because it can, assist them in getting owners to recognize the importance of doing this.
And a lot of our engagement too has been with representatives of the building owners or the property management groups
Exactly.
that represent these end users.
And that's great, but again, those are situations in the central corridor that you have these large glossy buildings that, have been built in the last 30 years, whereas you have, I'll use my ward as a perfect example. We have light industrial corridors that have buildings that are 50 to 200, 300,000 square feet of space. They're not very profitable buildings, and generally they're light manufacturing, which is not a particularly profitable business. The profit margins are very slim. If I have someone who's doing food processing on Gustine, that's in a 100,000 square foot building, food processing also takes up a lot of energy as well. Yes, there are ways to gain efficiencies there, but, I hear, BJC, Bank of America, like, I'm just more curious about the folks who are, the SLPSs of the world, the manufacturing facilities that are along the rail lines that, have these massive warehouses that, they're 150 years old in some cases. That is no small chump change to improve those buildings.
Sure.
Do they need to be improved? Absolutely. How are we going to be addressing those types of end users is my question. We need to get them there. How are we doing it?
That's what this bill does.
So,
And that's part of the reason we have the board as well. Our objective is to create pathways for people to go ahead and comply. And, I would ask you this, Mr. Chairman, how many people of those buildings you're talking about have complained to you about the benchmarking process?
well, I've had one, but I also don't have that many. There's probably a total of 20 of those types of buildings in my ward. So.
Yeah, in fairness, and, I think our objective has always been in the building division to try and work with people, to try and get people to comply. Our last thing we want to do is to find them and, go that route. And we'll continue to go that route to try to work with people, and that's the whole objective of this legislation, is to have this board be available with expertise And then not only that, but also have our people on staff to work with folks. You know, this is kind of I keep saying this is an evolution because, you know, I want Rajiv to be involved with my whole plan review section. Our whole mindset needs to be more, you know, about the environment and how we can change and how we can help people and developers when they come in, and the engineers and the architects, so that this mindset is, you know, part of the St. Louis community.
And I totally respect that, you know, that's
I hear you.
an amazing statement.
We've really done a lot of
But-
our homework on, we really have.
And I acknowledge that. I mean, it's a good board bill. You know, I plan on supporting it, you know, voting for it. But I just, you know, I want to make sure while we're having this conversation
Sure.
today that,
I
you know,
understand.
we're working through and just having a conversation around, you know, other avenues, right? So I'll stop monopolizing the time. Alderwoman Tyus, you can monopolize the time.
No, I don't. So sometimes no, you ask really good questions because I live in a household where a person does green energy and energy services. So I'm always for things like that. But he raised some good points. So my question would be, do we have something in staff where we could do? So what my husband does is he finds, we go, and I travel with him sometimes, we find ways to find grants and everything for historically black colleges, large companies and everything. So is there something in the building division that if people need to change what they're doing, could we, or do we have the ability to point them out and say to do this? Or could we have our own kind of in-house energy service that would be able to point them in the direction of this is where you could maybe do this, this, and this?
That's exactly what I'm talking about, and that's what this bill does, is it creates that office, it creates a couple of positions with Rajiv, and those are the people I need to really integrate with our plan review section, so that when somebody comes in for a permit, that the whole process, you know, involved of getting, you know, building something, improving something, you know, has an energy component and an energy savings mindset to it.
Right. And I think what, you're not hearing, young man, so I wanted to say this, is that what the chairman is saying is that this is all corporate America. Inclusion does not mean corporate America. That's, wait, you be quiet and let me talk, okay? This is a process where you get acknowledged, okay? And you're not acknowledged. I'm talking to you, not asking for your response. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. Inclusion means you got here affordable housing tenants. You know, inclusion means people who own small buildings. I mean, maybe right at 50,000. So everybody is not wealthy, and so and even somebody might have a large building that they inherited and they don't have a lot of money, and they're running a family business on a shoestring, okay? So anything that could put them out of business. So when you bring this doesn't say inclusion, okay? This says, yeah, we talk to all the big people who got lots of money who can do it. And I'm for the bill and I'm gonna vote for it. But inclusion means some other things that sometimes people do not understand, okay? It's the people who don't normally get to come to the table. It used to be the people, environmentalists were not included, okay? So you're at the table now, so don't make the same mistake that other people made to leave out the other people who may have a difference of opinion than you, or just have a different outlook. So that's what he's talking about, inclusion, okay? I have no further questions.
Thank you. I've got a rotating committee this morning. Alderwoman Rice.
I think we covered my questions.
Okay. Alderwoman Ingracia, I know you're not on the committee, but do you have any?
No, thank you for
Any
asking.
questions?
I'm a co-sponsor and supportive of the effort.
So,
May I be acknowledged to make a remark?
yeah, Rajiv.
Thank you, Shane and Alderwoman Tice. Just in addition to like helping those end users. So in the bills, Section 4 talks about standards of compliance. Section 5 talks about the Building Energy Improvement Board. So right now there are multiple compliance pathways for building owners. For the ones you're talking about who are tied down by financial constraints or capacity issues. So that's one of the main aims of the compliance pathway number 2, where they present alternative compliance plans to the Building Energy Improvement Board, which is made up of those 9 experts. So like these standards that will be made by building type, if a building owner knows that they cannot reach that standard, it's one of the duties of the board to hear an appeal process so that threshold may be lowered on behalf of that building owner for that certain property type. Because we wanted to integrate that flexibility, because we're very well aware that not all building owners will be able to meet the standard that we're proposing. For example, the public school system. You know, I've been working with their building commissioner and their analyst on this very issue. So we've definitely taken into account that some building owners will have to have a threshold dropped in order to meet the standard. But ultimately, we're trying to get them to meet the standard. But there are these compliance pathways that will take into account these financial and capacity constraints. Also, in addition, like Alderwoman Navarro said, it's a 4-year compliance cycle, but we've also given an extension for houses of worship and for affordable housing, a 6-year cycle. But if they believe they cannot meet the standard, that's one of the reasons that this board exists, so they can submit alternative compliance plans, have them reviewed by the 9-member board, and make the recommendation to the building division on, hey, this building owner or group of building owners needs to have their threshold ratcheted down. And I will say also, just not everyone in there is, corporate interests or anything or like that, but that's the final remarks I wanted to make.
Okay, Alderwoman Race.
Sorry, just one more, I did think of something. So I know that we have incredible compliance with the benchmarking, which is no other city in the country is getting up to 83% on this, right? I think.
No, there are some.
There are some? Okay, good. Well, that's great. Better. I like it when we're exceptional, but it's great that everybody else is doing it too.
Well, I don't think anybody got as fast as we did.
Okay, that's a great number. And I want to just quickly question: has any other city implemented the building energy performance standards yet? Are we sort of on the front lines of this?
So right now, there are only 3 jurisdictions in the whole country that have this type of standard in place: DC, New York, and the state of Washington.
Okay.
New York's is a little different. They're doing a building carbon standard.
Okay.
DC has a performance standard, but they're using a different performance metric.
Okay.
There are other cities across the country that are working on this policy.
Great.
Here in the Midwest, I know Chicago is one of them. But if we get this passed, which I'm very hopeful that we will, St. Louis will be the first jurisdiction in the Midwest to have a policy like this.
Okay. And then as far as the committee or the board goes, that is something that isn't necessarily usually a part of the process that we're trying to do because of these concerns, that we're trying to help people get to that and not just bring a hammer down and expect people to rise to that standard.
That's correct. It's one of the unique defining elements of our ordinance, having this board set up, as well as also to what Alderwoman Tai said about like having a resource hub. That's one of the reasons this bill would also create the Office of Building Performance. That's what we've gone with it, so I can have staff to help execute that. But we're also trying to build a greater resource hub within not just the city, but also for the region, but that's a longer conversation.
Yeah, there's tremendous amounts of resources from the utilities. They're forced by the feds to do those things. And I see it as a role of ours that we can go ahead and take this and run with it, expand it, and actually get more people doing and utilizing those things if we have this office.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay.
To that point, Commissioner, I fully support your office. Your office, in my estimation, has been one of the more woefully underfunded departments in city government for a number of years now. How are we going to fund this office? I mean, we're talking about, I know on paper we have, 2 or 3 building inspectors per ward, but in practicality, that's not generally how that works out. How can we continue to maintain basic levels of service for occupancy permits, housing conservation inspections, and the 1/3 of the ward inspections that are supposed to be happening? That I think most of us would have the same reaction as Alderman Tyus. How are we planning to sustainably fund an office like this?
Okay, that's a great question, and I'm glad you asked, actually. As most of you probably are aware, there was a commitment by the voters many years ago to establish a lead remediation fund. Our lead remediation fund is based upon the amount of money that people spend on building permits, and it is actually healthy and generating more than enough for our lead. So we're gonna actually take some of this, we've always called it a lead and environmental fund. So I think it's reasonable to go ahead and take, I think it's $200 and something thousand a year.
About 220,000.
Yeah, and we're gonna be funding it out of there. So that way I know it'll always be funded and I'll always be able to cover those costs. So that's how we're doing it, basically. And to be honest with you, that's why no 10-10 funds or any of the budget issues will really matter on this concern. So that's where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comment, Alderman Tyus?
Alderwoman, but that's good,
Or,
that's
I'm
close.
sorry, did I say Alderman? Sorry.
That's all right. So when I hear you say you're gonna take it out the lead fund, I know we've been doing good things with the lead fund. Do we anticipate there's being any kind of backlash? Because I don't think I know what you're saying, but I don't think we sold it as the environmental fund. I think that we sold it as the lead fund. So
Yeah.
is there going to be any lessening of service if we do this?
There
with the
will
lead?
not be any lessening of service. We've
Okay.
continued to get money from the federal government for our lead remediation activities.
Okay.
So we do have extra resources in this, and, I believe we'll be fine. I don't think I will take that on if anybody wants to challenge a wise use of this money.
I have no further questions.
Okay, so we have an amendment.
Yes.
Do we just have the one?
Yes, there's just one amendment. It has two small changes in here, and there is a marked copy and a clean copy. I apologize for the trees, but wanted to make sure everybody had what they needed in front of them. So the first one is on page 5, and what we're doing, it's talking about how the standards will be set no lower than the 65th percentile by property type, and really what we've done is just add such that at least 65% of the buildings of that property type have a higher EUI, which is energy use intensity. And that just came out of some of these conversations about really wanting to clarify what does that 65% mean. So we added that phrase, such that at least 65% of the buildings of that property type have a higher EUI. And I'll just go through both of these real quick, and then if people have questions. And then the second one is found later on page 5. And what this specifies is, so following every compliance cycle, there shall be a period of time of up to 1 year between each compliance cycle to allow the Building Energy Improvement Board time to reevaluate and to update the building energy performance standards. So that's essentially saying that they'll be just specifying that that board has a year to then reevaluate and come up with the standards for the next compliance cycle. And if anyone up here wants to add anything to that, please feel free.
I'll just add that those standards that we're creating are based on local benchmarking data from the Building Energy Awareness Ordinance. So we're using local benchmarking data collected from our own buildings to inform these standards.
And the other thing I wanted to mention was that I've just been super impressed with the amount of quality people who are already asking to be on this board. People with just tremendous knowledge and background in this field, so I think it really shows, what we have here in St. Louis.
Okay, well, before we can amend the bill, we have to have the bill before us in committee, so I'll entertain a motion that we take up Board Bill number 219 before committee.
So moved. Previous roll.
Previous roll, hearing no objection to previous roll, we're now,
Move. Second, Rice.
yeah,
Previous roll.
yep.
Kidding me? That's right.
Okay, so now that we're hearing Board Bill number 219, I'll entertain a motion for amendment number 1 to Board Bill number 219.
I move that we amend Board Bill 219 with Amendment 1.
Second, sorry.
Previous roll. Hey, you got
Any
it.
objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection to
See, if you
previous
want
rule,
rules, you wouldn't have to do this.
amendment number 1 to Board Bill 219 has passed. So I will entertain any questions for Board Bill number 219 as amended. Any questions? Alderman, do you have anyone that would like to speak on behalf of the bill, or?
You know, we do have a number of people here. I don't know if there's anything we haven't already addressed that anyone feels, or if the committee has any other questions, I'm happy to bring people up, but otherwise, I think we've,
Okay.
Shared.
Or just introduce them for
Yeah,
taking
any
their time.
acknowledgements
Yeah.
that you would like to
Yeah, there have been a
share?
lot of people who have worked on this bill, and just a few of them are here in this room. I would hate to miss anybody who's not, I don't know if you all wanna thank all the various organizations who've been involved.
Oh man, there's so many to thank,
Yeah.
but I will just say, like, I know some of them have comments that they're ready to make. If they want to,
I think we're
but
good.
like Andrew and
I
Dana
think, yeah.
do a lot for affordable housing, so
Yeah.
if any of the committee members are interested about that.
So yeah, we got Renew Missouri, Sierra Club is here, US Green Building Council. Dana, you're.
Tower Grove
Tower-
Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation.
Thank you, Dana Gray, yes. We've got architects.
Energy resources.
Yes.
AT&T.
Oh, thank you.
Spire.
St. Louis Regional Chamber.
Great, thank you. I did not mean to ignore this side of the room by any means, thank you.
See how they divide?
And I don't know if there's anyone else here to testify
Social
on
distance
the
at
bill.
play.
Corporate.
Yeah.
The seats were taken when I came in. I just wanted to sit by you, Alderwoman.
We're just joking.
Did anyone have any testimony in favor or opposition to the bill that are in the gallery here? Before, okay.
I think there was some talk about exemption of
Leroy, could you take a seat for the purposes of
It was,
oh, I was late, huh? Leroy Grant, AT&T, and I think that was just I think there was another bill that was passed last year that exempted the telecommunications industry and those industries of high technology and infrastructure. And I think that you included that also in this as well, is that not correct?
Yes, so the language that exempted those buildings previously, it continues in this bill.
Okay,
So
that was my only concern. I didn't know if there needed to be a separate amendment or anything, but since it was in the previous, it just
It's-
flows over to the new one.
Yeah, it's
Is
the
it the
same
disclosure
language.
due to like security issues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my only concern.
Okay. So, and because this is essentially establishing findings based off of the previous board bill, those are automatically, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments, expressions of,
Cigarette candy.
thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
okay, so, thank you, Commissioner. It's always good to have you, before us. With that, I don't hear any other questions or, anyone else from the gallery, so I'll entertain a motion on Board Bill number 219 as amended.
I move we pass Board Bill 219 as amended with a due pass recommendation.
Second. Okay,
Previous roll.
see there? I'm moving on.
Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection to previous roll, Board Bill number 219 as amended passes out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
Thank you.
We do have technically three other items that we are going to hear this morning.
98.
We have 3 resolutions for funding for the Parks Committee.
Oh, here it is, yeah.
These have been on our calendar for quite some time. and I know many of our colleagues are anxious to get some of their projects underway.
We'll all use hand sanitizer later.
I'm gonna afford some time to let folks leave. Thank you everyone for coming down. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to hear more about our parks funding process.
I thought we were going to go to our parks today.
We do need to schedule that.
I know, this is like, okay, this is a great day.
Unfortunately, our parks folks are giving you a bit of a quid pro quo.
Thank you.
Oh, really?
Indeed they are, okay?
And what would that be? Secrets?
So, I
Not on record,
might have
okay?
something to do with the 3 board bills or resolutions before us. But in all seriousness, these have been before our committee for the greater part of the session at this point. You know, there are annual funding allotments for our parks. Part of the delay in having these heard before the committee, 2 items on my part. One, you know, I would like to, which this is not reflected in the resolutions, update the language that's in the resolutions because of the methodology in which our Parks Department allocates these, and then leftover funds from projects are essentially not addressed in the resolution. And so I want to make sure that there's some sort of resolution or addressment of those resolve funds, because right now they just get drawn back into a pool and then allocated without a resolution. So, so I do want to make sure that we're addressing that. I have not been able to work through that with the city councilor's office at this juncture, and do not want to continue to hold up projects throughout the city. So I'll continue to work through that on my end for this coming year's allocation, which we should be getting these resolutions before us in a few months now for the new year. The second item is that we do have on resolution number 98 and resolution number 100 an item that is allocating money towards a project that's not in a city park. And so I have asked the clerk to strike that project from the appendix. That would be the 3rd Ward, Windsor Park, old police station. The old police station is not actually located in the city park. I understand, you know, that's a project that we'll have to address separately, but I don't want Elliot Davis coming after any member of this committee for passing out funds for something that's not.
And it's also in, it was in 98 and 100?
And 100 as well. I don't, these are funds that are meant exclusively for our parks and not for future projects that may potentially be within a park.
Right.
And so we need to cross that out because it's not legal. I'll entertain questions from the committee on any of the 3 resolutions, and then we can address them separately if necessary.
Okay, I actually had $100 and some thousand left over, which I ended up giving to forestry to work and cut trees and do some other things that's in the park. But the reason why I had the money left over is because they didn't do my projects, and so I had to go back and forth. I'm just telling the committee this about should I give it to them, because I was really irritated because they didn't complete my projects. And they were supposed to put money in one of these sites to give me my money back, which is not in here. I intend to recapture this, so I intend to recapture my money. So since we're taking this out, is this committee opening to us amending this resolution and adding that? I don't want to do it right now. Or are we just gonna go ahead with what they usually do, which is just we got this extra money and you can use it? Which way do you want to do it?
That is an excellent question. My thought is, well, my initial thought was we would just eliminate that particular project because it's not legal.
Right.
And so, you know, I'm not passing out a resolution funding a project that's not
Right.
legally.
But that's gonna leave extra money,
But it would leave extra money.
which is mine.
So, I'm wondering if we can we do a separate resolution allocating the funds that have been,
We just amend this resolution, that's what I'm saying.
well, for the interest of time, I would like to.
I don't wanna do it
like,
now, I'm just
yeah.
saying I will come back and do it, I don't wanna do it now.
Oh, yeah, and you and
Okay.
I can
Right.
talk offline about that. So we
Right.
can pass these out and then later come back and do another resolution, essentially amending
Right.
resolution number 98 and 100.
And do we need to change totals anyplace? It says we're taking,
So are we amending this?
yeah, because
bill?
we're amending,
Yeah,
we're
so
taking
we
out,
would
right.
be amending resolution number 98 and 100. On 98, it would be the 50,000. Or I'm sorry, the 150,000.
Right. So don't we have to change the grand total?
So we would, the grand total at the bottom, the 692 would be less 150,000.
Right,
I'll get the math for you too.
thank you.
542.
Well, and what about that whole line for Windsor Park, the total cost, match?
So
Is
the
that whole
match comes
line-
out of a separate budget pool, so this resolution is specifically geared towards the Metro Parks tax. So the allocation in resolution 98 is the $150,000.
So do we need to amend that total cost
It would
to say
be,
50,000, I mean, if we're subtracting 150?
yeah, so we would add the 150 to the unspecified projects.
Okay.
And then,
And that, I'm talking about that very first row at the top where it says total cost for Windsor Park is 200, should that now say 50? Because isn't that adding up the Metro Park tax plus the match?
But it can't cover what we passed, that he might do.
so the 692,315.98 would be 542,165.
Can't be either.
98.
It doesn't make it all.
Well, as it, but if we're adding the 150 to unspecified projects,
The-
then the grand total will stay the
I'm-
same.
Okay, that's what we're doing.
The grand total, oh, I see what
That'll stay the
Yeah, yeah,
same.
yeah.
But I'm asking
Yeah, yeah,
though,
yeah.
separate from that though,
You're right,
that,
yes.
that first column, or that first row that reads across, the total cost for Windsor Park should now say 50,000, because we're eliminating the 150,000 from the Metro Parks tax.
That's adding it to this one.
This is almost at the end.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the column down here, but I'm asking, are we eliminating, no, I think for this one, we're just eliminating this 150, because this has the Metro Park tax. So I'm asking, the very first number under total cost in the first row, should that be changed to 50,000 to reflect that we're subtracting 150,000 from 200,000?
Right, so we have to eliminate it because it's not legally a park right now.
I know, that's what she was
So-
saying.
But so Alderwoman Tyus and I are going to work on a separate resolution amending these at a different point in time where we'll
And then
reallocate.
and we're coming up with the new parks things
Appreciate
coming
it.
back up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
just,
didn't know.
because these have been on hold for so long, we need to get these out so that all the other park funding
So it's coming out.
happens, yeah.
Okay, that's understood.
Okay, so it's coming out both, to make sure.
So the total project costs, I'm not concerned about, that's
I'm not asking about total
negligent.
project costs.
Yeah,
I'm asking
so-
about in that very first row where it says Windsor Park, and if you read across to the right, it says the total cost is 200.
Right.
I'm wondering if that should be changed to 50 to reflect that
No,
we're
because it
subtracting
is
out the
still a total
150.
project,
Okay.
we're lining out that whole,
Okay, that's what I was,
that whole thing is just zeroed out.
okay.
Can I get one of these?
Yeah, there's a,
There-
oh, no, that is not a,
Christina, here, she's not on the committee, so you can,
Right.
okay, and we need the other ones, is there, are they in here? Resolutions, 199, there you go. So the amount we came up with was,
So the unspecified projects would go up by $150,000, so that then gets
Right.
changed to 512,189. The grand total and budget would remain the same,
184 is,
184, that's a full.
184.
Right.
What sorry, 184.
and then the grand total is,
It would remain the same,
okay, so we're not, right, okay, yeah, we just go to unspecified.
right?
That's great. Will we be doing the same thing in,
So, and then the same thing would happen in resolution number 100. which would be the fourth project down.
$66,000.
Yeah.
49.69, and we're gonna add 66,000?
So that 347.
Okay. So it becomes $413?
$413, $49.69.
Okay.
They're still, so see, they still, you can just come back and recapture it, cause some of this is what they hold you to. So we can just recapture, so you get it changed.
So, and some background for you all too, the Parks Funds and the Parks Department allocates these versus, North and South, City. Frankly, they should also probably throw in the Central Corridor now as well, but, they don't currently. It's basically anything underneath Del Mar versus north of Del Mar gets a 50-50 split. So they look at the allocation requests that come in from the Board of Aldermen. Each year they send out an application process. And then we complete that, send it back to the Parks Department. They evaluate it based off of the need, the funds that are available, and then the allocation process, they go through and try and split it as closely as possible between north and south of Del Mar. And then when the unspecified funds, it's generally, those are used for, maintenance. So if there's a, water fountain that, has a car accident, or benches,
Yeah, that water fountain caused that car accident,
Yeah,
got right out in front of that car.
jump right out in front of that car, happens all the time.
It does. Like your balls in your squares.
Those come out of the Parks Department doesn't have a budget for those, they come out of the unspecified funds, unfortunately. So, we made those changes to 98 and 100, and per the agreement that we just made, we'll come back and, look at those funds and how we can, ensure that they remain in, obviously, North St. Louis, and reallocate those and amend it at a later point in time. But in the interest of trying to get these passed out, because it is affecting the funding for all of the park system right now, that they've been held up for the greater part of a year at this point. So, does anyone have any other questions, comments, concerns pertaining to any of the resolutions?
I actually do. I don't have any city-owned parks in the 8th Ward. They're, Tower Park is a public-private partnership, so
Right.
it's set up separately. But I do have, there are 2 pocket parks that, were, I guess, previously LRA lots and then were, the city owns, but the Parks Department does not maintain. One of them has, playground equipment on it that was, I think, privately funded, and the other one is maintained by the community that is more just, mulch and plants and things. And Parks Department does not want to have jurisdiction over those, but at the moment we have playground equipment on something that no one was really taking responsibility over. And I'm wondering how, I guess trying to figure out how in the world that came to be, and also how we could maybe get that sort of lined out correctly. So I know that doesn't really have to do with these
Yeah.
resolutions specifically, and I don't wanna take any money out of this by any way, shape, or form, but I do want to have a further conversation about, parks and about their responsibilities, because I think we all hear pushback and say, well, Parks doesn't wanna take responsibility for any more than they already have, which I understand there's limited resources, but what is the best way for this city, to move forward in these types of things? Like if we're creating more green spaces, if we're creating, whose responsibility are these spaces and how do we fund?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a conversation, I personally have had this conversation, prior to my chairmanship with the, commissioner and, director, about adding parks to the city's park system, or even expanding, parks, and so it is an ongoing conversation that I've had. I have, like you, received the same pushback and feedback that, we are not doing that. So the city has, I believe, it's 104 or 108 parks in our city, park system. And so, and they have a challenge taking care of those at the moment. So I am more than happy to have the director and the commissioner come before us to have that conversation. Part of, my thought process now as chair is I would actually like to try and use some of these funds to commission an evaluation and study of our park system. Because I don't think that we have done that in a very, very long time, if ever. And so, but I think that we need to start looking at utilization rates, the conditions of our parks currently, how we're utilizing them and how we can plan to improve them, increase utilization and things of that nature. So, so I'm definitely open to, having that conversation.
I appreciate that.
And I think that, it's not going to get resolved, with these 3 resolutions, but I hear you, and I think that, we do need to start having that conversation, and we need to start planning for our parks, and the people who utilize them.
Absolutely. We have a sign out in front of it that makes it look like it's an official part of the system, and it is not, in fact, part of the system. And so it took a couple of months to sort of trace down what exactly the thing is, and I still am not entirely sure. So I appreciate it for further conversation.
Well, I had a vacant piece of land that had a park sign out in front of it for the longest time, and people would call me and tell me that it needs to get moved by the city park department, even though it was privately owned.
I can add something.
Yeah.
So when people start doing these pocket parks, most of them which got done in South St. Louis, so the agreement was whoever did the pocket parks were supposed to take care of them. And if you want to take care of them, you take care of them out of your ward capital funds, okay?
Okay.
So that was the agreement from way back. They stopped a lot of the pocket parks.
Okay.
If you're a senior alderperson, you can still, there was ways that they got theirs to be parks. Cause Marty Abusi Park, I can tell you, all the parks, if you had enough power, but they mostly stopped everyone from making the pocket parks part of the system. So organizations had to agree to take care of them. They did donate, but the alderperson had to really take money from your pot of money to take care of it. That's what happened.
Okay.
But I went and looked up, I wanted to say this, I went and pulled the original taxes that we passed back in 94, Freeman 93. Because I don't believe that they're using the stuff, the money right or charging us. I've been very irritated about the speed hump studies and things like that. So I had introduced a thing to get rid of speed humps under street calming. But it made me go back to 1993, and it was ordinance 62885. It's the original ordinance, which they're not. I've had several meetings with Rich Bradley about what they're doing with our money. And and this also was when the tax money came for the parks too, because we passed 2 sales taxes. So I would like to have further conversation, because you're talking about money that goes to the park. In the years since we've levied the money for the park, Forest Park has gotten $50-something million. South St. Louis parks have gotten like $18 million. And North St. Louis parks have gotten about, because it was only 2, which I was just so opposed to and was irritated. I think it was like $7 million, because Vince Shamel wrote the ordinance. So Brandon knows I'm real truthful. We told his brother Freeman, you cannot pass Vince Shamel's board bill because it's gonna be against North St. Louis. So I have been pulling all the stuff to just show you how unfair all this stuff has been over the years. Because when you bring somebody who has no interest in doing the correct thing, this is what you get. So South St. Louis, Tower Grove Park gets money, which they shouldn't have got because it's not really our park. So it's all kind of things that has happened that is really unfair to North St. Louis. So I will be releasing all of this and having some further conversations with them, because we did not give them permission to come up with study fees and things like that. Specifically, when we passed this tax, it was supposed to be for hard costs. So all of a sudden, when they come with these fees, what they're doing is they're taking money that should be going to the parks and to other things. And in fact, it's specifically, we're supposed to have let's see here, a major parks capital improvement, a ward capital improvement, a recreation center capital improvement, a citywide capital improvement, a police department capital improvements. So a lot of things, they kind of hijacked our money. And then several years when Francis was here, they took money out of these accounts, and that was not supposed to, it specifically says you are not to take that money for anything except for that. So, and that's what happens as time goes on when you pass these things, and if you don't have history, they're not using it right, okay? I don't think that they get to have the last say about parks, because 20 aldermen, we could put a park in place if we want to. So maybe we look at the big map and the big picture, and we decide, do we need some here? And then we go in as 20 aldermen, and then it is. And the mayor doesn't get to say it, neither does the park departments. They can recommend. But we can look at the big picture for our city. That's all.
And to that end, you know, I like having data in front of us, you know,
Right.
when we're making those types of decisions. So, you know, I would like to try and find a way to fund a plan for our, you know, citywide park system.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on resolution number 98.
I move we,
With the changes that we made?
Oh, yeah, as amended, sorry, thank you. Resolution number 98 as amended.
I move we pass resolution 98 as amended. I would do pass recommendation.
Second. Previous roll.
Objection.
Objection.
Oh, okay.
Object to previous roll. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Boswell.
Aye.
Alderwoman Navarro.
Aye.
Alderwoman Rice.
Aye.
Alderman Todd.
Aye.
Chairman Cohen.
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin. You have 6 aye votes.
Great. With that, resolution number 98 as amended passes out of the Parks Committee. Resolution number 99, I'll entertain a motion.
Move we pass resolution number 99. I would do pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection to previous roll, resolution number 99 passes out with a due pass recommendation. For the, do we need to actually adopt the amendments to these resolutions,
You,
since it's a resolution? It's an appendix.
yeah, you can incorporate it all in one
Yeah,
motion if you
okay.
want to, which is.
So, I'll entertain a motion on resolution number 100 as amended.
I move that we pass resolution number 100. I would do pass recommendation.
Second.
Previous roll.
Any objection to previous roll? Hearing no objection, resolution number 100 as amended passes out of committee with a due pass recommendation. All right, thank you, everyone. Sorry it's taken a little bit of time to get to this place, but hopefully we'll be able to move things forward.
When does the new parks recommendations come out?
They send out those letters, I believe, in March,
Right, so
if I'm not mistaken.
I got
I thought we got them already.
Yeah.
I think they were due already, actually. The responses were due. I think they came in this year.
one of those too already.
Mine always just, it's blank and it just says you have no parks, so.
Yeah, mine says you have a park, but you don't need to fund it.
Mine says you have too many parks.
No, the 26th ward has like 8, 10 parks. or something.
Okay.
I think they have 11 even.
Wow.
Well,
Six.
Yeah, so unless there's any other business that the committee would like to take up, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move that we adjourn until
the
the
field
next
trip
time you tell us to
All
meet.
Sounds good. All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Yeah. So I had a meeting with Ernie Tracus